Do you have a soul? Is it something that you think about? And if you do have a soul, what exactly is it? Is it our sense of ourself, our inner being, our core being? Is it something that is a result of our biological organization? Or has it been put there by a creator? Is it immortal? This is probably not a question that you think about terribly much. The more religious among you will have thought long and hard about the nature of your immortal soul. However, it is an issue that is absolutely central when we try and explore explanations for madness in the Middle Ages and the early modern periods. So what we're going to start off doing here is to undertake a brief history of the soul before moving along to see how it fitted in with the various theories of disease that were current during this period. William Blake's engraving, the soul leaving the body, reluctantly parting with life. I think we see in this image a very traditional view of the soul, the Christian view of the soul. And for much of Christian history, this was the predominant view. The soul was something that inhabited the body, controlled the body up to a point, was possessed with reason, and was immortal. This situation created significant problems for understanding madness. It was clear a soul could become corrupted by evil, making poor judgments and being led into temptation. But the soul itself couldn't go mad because of its eternal nature. Imagine this scenario: the madman dying, raving, crazy, violent. If his soul went mad and remained mad unto death, how could he be judged? How could he be held responsible for his actions? And what sort of a God would have anyway allowed the soul to be touched by madness? Certainly not a benign one. Now, the period we are about to examine saw a dramatic change in how bodies and souls were imagined, and in turn how madness and its treatment was configured and reconfigured. We start during a period where madness was either perceived as an imbalance of the humours, the result of poor treatment of the body, or as a product of supernatural intervention, as we saw in the last module. We see as well that as society transforms, religion weakens, science becomes a dominant way of exploring the world. In other words, the whole process of the Enlightenment, a transformation occurs in ideas about the body and the mind and the soul. The place of the soul then becomes relegated. Focus is laid upon the senses and their connections with the mind and consciousness, opening up the way for the moral therapy that we see in the asylums in the 19th century. Behind all of this, it's important to remember that the body, the soul, and the mind all have a history. The soul itself is conceived differently in different periods. The Christian soul as we know it now is very much an invention of the Middle Ages, a buttress of Orthodox Christianity, guarding the authority of popes and kings. The soul as well is central to eschatology, in other words, theories about the end of days, the apocalypse, and to the maintenance of order and social stability, which is then integrated to notions of heaven and hell, heavenly reward, purgatory and punishment. Bodies were secondary to all of this, temporal, decaying, a mark of weakness, a mark of humanity, a mark of the fall. Although, of course, it was believed that the soul would be reunited with the body at the last judgment. But it was crucial for the soul to be purged from the medical view of madness, and purged it was under the rigour of the empiricist thinkers of the Enlightenment. And this is the process that we will now examine. So first of all, I want to set up Descartes with his Cartesian dualist thinking as a benchmark. And I'm going to put forward the idea there is a before and after Descartes in relation to madness and the soul. So as I've just indicated, the sense of self, our soul, is bound to God and the order of the world at this time. William Blake's Ghost of a Flea, like much of Blake's work, is somewhat heretical in terms of orthodox religion. Most people in the post-Descartes era would not believe that animals possess souls. Blake, on the other hand, had a weird pantheistic view of the universe that could see the soul in everything. Nevertheless, Blake bound the soul to God and the order of the world. The soul, as well, is pre-existing. It is the substance of humanity, and it is the seat of reason. Now, as we've seen, the body can be possessed by the devil or through witchcraft, but the soul remains untouched. If the individual so possessed is exorcised and the demons leave them, they once again become a rational individual. And of course, the soul as well can be perverted by an alliance with the devil, the Faustian pact. But this is a decision freely made by reason and therefore freely made by the soul. And the soul can be held accountable for making this kind of bargain. But as we've seen already, most madness is a bodily affliction far removed from the supernatural. Now, this is the problem of madness and the soul. In Aristotelianism, orthodox scholastic theology continues to insist that the soul is immortal and inviolate right the way through the Middle Ages. This, of course, had been questioned by Lucretius in the 1st century BC. He believed that body and the mind were made of the same material. If not cured, the soul is violated and possibly destroyed. It is corrupted by madness. And for him, madness demonstrated that the soul was just as mortal as the body, and upon death, upon expiration, the soul would be destroyed. This is a materialist position that challenges the orthodox thinking of the scholastic tradition, and it is also heretical, and yet it is something that is played around with and tested. It is the doctrine against which the problem of madness and the soul has to be solved. Now, the best way of defending the immortal soul can be seen from the 17th century conceptions described in Akihito Suzuki's article. The essence of the soul remains intact during the most violent fit of madness, and the disorder takes place only in the body. Here we see David, and within David there is a brain, and within the brain we can see two forms of functions. Higher functions of judgment and reason, this is the location of the soul, and lower functions that relate to memory, imagination, and fantasy. And obviously there's a connection between the two, and obviously one influences the other. The hope is that reason can exercise control over fantasy. Now, the early modern view was this, if we build in humorism. Maybe we see an attack of the black bile, melancholia ensues, and in the process breaks the link between the lower functions and the higher functions. So what is affected in an attack like this are memory, imagination, and fantasy. Judgment and reason are still there, but they're cut off from the rest of the body. The soul is left inviolable and intact. Just after Burton had written his magnum opus on melancholia, Descartes launched his dualistic theory on an unsuspecting world, where the humoral system had been essentially holistic, with body and mind integrated together. Cartesianism would separate the two, while still managing to find a special physical location for the soul. It is to Descartes that we now turn, and the reaction to his dualistic thinking that laid the groundwork for the emergence of moral therapy.